lot of good investigative journalism begins by taking two or more lists that ought to be mutually exclusive and cross-checking them and finding overlap between those lists. The problem is Microsoft Excel is just not very good at doing that. You can do it with functions like VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP and match, and you can explore those on your own if you want to. What you'll find though is that they're kind of difficult to use and it's kind of a clunky process. If you have to do this sort of thing, it's really better to use Microsoft Access, which is an entirely separate program. It's a relational database. You'll often find it in the same Office suite as Microsoft Excel, but it's a little better at this sort of list comparison task that we're talking about. So if you have to do that, it's often good to collect your data in Microsoft Excel, but get it imported into Access. Use Access for the matching task and maybe a couple of other things, and then pull the data back out into Microsoft Excel for more analysis using the kinds of techniques you've been learning. Let me give you an example of the sort of thing I'm talking about. Let's suppose we have one list of what I'll call deadbeats, people who owe the city some kind of money for some kind of reason. This money could be, for example, unpaid parking fines or traffic tickets, or it could be overdue property taxes, or maybe business licenses that haven't been paid, or fines, or anything like that. Typically, there's a fair amount of this kind of revenue just kind of sitting there on the city books that the city has either not gone after or has been unable to go after. So that's one list. Let's imagine we've got that. But now let's imagine we have a second list, a list of people who work at City Hall. Now, these are two lists that should not overlap. If the city ought to be able to find anybody who owes it money, it ought to be able to find people on its own staff who owe it money. They're not that difficult to spot. They're right there on the payroll. You know their office numbers and their phone numbers and so forth. So these are two lists that shouldn't overlap, but in fact they just might. So what we need to do conceptually here is put these two lists together, just like that, to produce three kinds of people. People there in Area 1, probably the biggest group of people, who would be people who owe the city money, but don't work for the city hall. They're just ordinary citizens out there who, for whatever reason, owe the city some money. Another group of people would be the people there in Area 3. These would be people who work at City Hall and who don't owe the city any money. They're all paid up. They don't have any reason to owe the city money, perhaps. But the people that would be newsworthy, that we'd be interested in identifying and learning more about, would be the people there in the middle category. People who are on the deadbeat list, who owe the city some kind of money, and also work at City Hall and are sort of right under the noses of the city's bill collectors. Using Microsoft Access, we could figure out who these people are, and we could do it pretty quickly and pretty efficiently. And once we did that, we could ask some newsworthy questions. For example, well, who are they? Anybody prominent on the list, for example? That would be newsworthy if that were the case. How much in total do they owe? Just how much money is the city missing out on here? What is the typical amount that each of them owes? What percentage of City Hall employees do they represent? Sort of how big of a problem is this among all City Hall employees? And what percentage of all deadbeats do they represent? Those would be some questions we could write some interesting news stories about. So let's have a look at how we can use Microsoft Access and Microsoft Excel together to get this job done. This is what Access looks like when you first open it up. There's usually a default file name here. We'll be changing that in a minute. Over here, you might see the names of databases that have been recently created or recently used, and some templates that you can choose from, and so forth. To get started with what we're going to be doing, let's first of all browse to where we're going to save this database. Now, I'm working off of an external drive, a jump drive, because I figure that's the way you're probably going to work as well. So I'm browsing to where I'm going to put this database, and I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it City Hall Deadbeats, just like that. And click OK. And then click the Create button right here. There, that creates the database. Now by default, Access is going to show you an open table, just an empty table. It's waiting for you to put data in. We're not going to use that table, so just click the X to close it. Now let's go find the two Excel files. Start by clicking on External Data and then choose the Excel icon. And then browse to where your Excel files are. Again, I've got them on that jump drive I mentioned earlier. There we go. And here's the first one, City Employees. You can take them in any order. I'm going to just go top to bottom here. Highlight the file and click Open. And you can take the default here and just click OK. And notice that Access has figured out that there are 3 different worksheets. The other 2 are blank, so we'll just take the first one. That's fine. Choose this box as well. This tells Access that the first row of data contains variable names, and then click Next. Now here, if you need to, you can change the format of each of the columns. The defaults are just fine here, but I just wanted to see that you could do that. Click Next again. And choose no primary key here. We seldom will need that with what we'll be doing. Click Next. Now let's come up with a name for the table. Let's call this City Hall Employees, just like that. And finally, Finish and Close. There, and just that easily we've gotten our first table in. I can click on it here, open it up, and it looks a lot like a spreadsheet, doesn't it? In fact, I can even highlight the columns like this, float my cursor on the border and double click, and I can expand the columns just like you can in Excel. Alright, so that's how you get data from Excel into Microsoft Access. It's not that difficult. Let's go get the next one now. Again, click the Excel icon, do this a little faster, browse to where the file is, and just burn through the import menu here, just like you did before. All the answers are the same. There's no primary key. Next. And give this one a name. Let's call it simply Deadbeats. And click Finish. And Close. And there we have our Deadbeats table open as well. Again, I can highlight on it and expand the columns. So now we're ready to do something with these two. Let's have a look at what we might be able to do. Now that we've imported both spreadsheets into Access, let's take a minute to review what we're trying to do. Remember that we're trying to use Access to find out if there are any people who are on both of these lists, and if so, we're going to try to answer these questions about those people, things like who they are and how much they owe and so forth. The first step, obviously, is to answer that very first question. Are there any people who are on both lists? To do that, we're going to use a basic query. To begin, click the Create ribbon and then choose the Query Design icon. And on this Show Table, click the 2 tables we're going to be dealing with, City Hall Employees and Deadbeats, and then click Close. Now if you look at the code books for these 2 data sets, you see that the last field in the City Hall Employees and the LNAME field in Deadbeats both contain last name information. Similarly, the first and FNAME fields both contain first name information. And the address fields, both in City Hall Employees and Deadbeats, contain address information. What a query does is it links these fields up, and then when you run the query, you're telling Access to find and display each City Hall Employees record that matches the address, first name, and last name of a record on the Deadbeats list. And Access will show you only the records for which there are matches. Okay, let's start setting this up. To begin, you just take the last field and drag it over on top of the LNAME field and turn loose of the mouse. And you see how Access has joined those 2 fields. Do the same thing with first and FNAME and address and the address field in Deadbeats. And so now we have these 3 connections between the 2 lists. Again, Access is going to simply search these 2 lists for records that have similar information on those fields. Let's now tell Access which fields we want it to display. I'm just clicking them here. Last name, first name, address, and department. And also the amount owed from over here in the Deadbeats list. One more thing, if I come here and choose descending here on the sort row, then when Access displays the information, it'll put the biggest amount owed at the top. Now click the big red exclamation point to run the query, and here we have our results. We found 42 people who were on both the deadbeats list and the City Hall employees list. And just like I can do in Excel, I can highlight these columns, float the cursor between the two of them, and click to expand them. So now we have Matthew Turner, who's here because there is a Matthew Turner at 4485 Gardendale Boulevard on both of those lists, probably the same guy. I can right-click on this query and save it. I'm going to give it a name here. Let's go with City Hall Deadbeats, and click OK. And notice how that query is now shown up here under Queries on the left side of the screen. Great. So now that's saved for later use. I'm going to go ahead and right-click on the tab and then close it so we can move on to other things now. So we've been able to prove that there is overlap between the two lists, and we've been able to list everybody who falls within that overlap. Now it's time to turn to the rest of these questions. I'm going to start by inserting a blank variable here that is going to indicate whether each of these individuals is or is not a City Hall employee. Now initially I'm going to set all of those answers to no, to indicate that nobody is a City Hall employee, and then I'm going to use something called an update query to go back and change those no's to yeses for everybody who is on the City Hall employees list. To begin, let's right-click on the Deadbeats tab and choose Design View. And in the first available blank line, I'm going to type a name for this new variable that I'm inserting. Let's call it City Hall Employee ? Now by default, Access makes that a text format field, and other formats are available. Just wanted you to see that. But a text format will do fine for what we're going to use right here. Okay, now I'm going to right-click on the Deadbeats tab again and choose Save. That saves the changes. And then right-clicking again, I'm going to choose, let's see, Datasheet View, just to get back to where I'm looking at the data. And there's the blank variable right there. I can stretch the column out a little bit. So now let's create a query that finds every record in the Deadbeats list, and then program that query to give everyone a no in the City Hall employee column. To get started, click the Create ribbon, and then choose the Query Design icon and put the Deadbeats list up and click Close. Now I'm going to choose just the FName field and also the City Hall employee field that we just created. And here in the Criteria row, I'm going to type an asterisk. That'll select every record with any information on FName. You can test it out by clicking the big red exclamation point, and you can see that the query finds all 594 of the records. We know that by looking right down here. Access will tell you how many of the records the query selected. So now let's modify that query to add a no to every City Hall employee field for each record. We click Create and go back to the Query tab and choose Design View. And then up here in the top row, find and click on this Update icon. That changes the query to an update query. And it simply adds this row right here, this Update To row. Under City Hall Employee Deadbeats, I'm going to type a no to tell Access that's what I want it to put in every field that every City Hall employees field that is selected, and then I'm going to run the query. Now Access gives me this warning: you're about to change a bunch of records. Do you really want to do that? And the answer is yes. Okay. So let's right-click on the Query tab and save that. And let's give it a name that we can easily identify. How about Set All set all City Hall statuses to no. And then click OK. Alright. And then let's right-click on that query and click Close. Okay. So you can see now that there's a no in every row of the for the City Hall employee ? Field. So now we need a query that'll change those no's to yeses for every person who appears on the City Hall employees list. Again, click Query Design, and let's put City Hall employees and Deadbeats up because we need both of them to do this. And let's match up the fields just like you saw me do earlier. Drag last on top of last name, first on top of F name, and address on top of address. And that links the two up, so now we'll just find the matches. And let's add the City Hall employee question mark field to the list, and choose the big red exclamation point. Again, we're just checking to make sure this query works, and it does. It found 42 records. That's the same number that we found earlier when we were looking for overlap. So now let's modify the query. Right-click on the Query tab, choose Design View, and change it to an update query by clicking the Update button. And let's update to yes. There we go. And then click the red exclamation Run button. And we're about to update 42 rows. That's the answer is yes, we want to do that. And now if we go back and look at deadbeats, it seems to have worked. There's Stephen Reed, and he's a yes because he is on both the City Hall employees list and also here in the deadbeats list. And others have been changed as well. So now let's save that query. Just right-click on the tab, choose Save, and let's give it a name. Kind of like the other one. Let's see. How about Flag City Hall employees on the deadbeats list? Okay. And then right-click and choose Save, and right-click again and choose Close. Looking back at the list of questions we're trying to answer, you can see that we already have some of those answers. For example, if we want to know who the deadbeats are, all we have to do is rerun the City Hall deadbeats query and we'll have a list of them. We've also been able to figure out that the 42 deadbeats from City Hall who showed up when we ran that query represent 16% of the total 266 people who work at City Hall. They also represent 7% of the 594 total number of deadbeats we have on the list. So we're making some progress. What we still don't know is how much in total these deadbeats owe, and also what the average amount each of them owes might be. Now, you might remember the subtotaling technique from Excel. You could use that technique to get the answers to these two questions. In fact, we could even highlight all the data so far. Just click on this in the upper left corner, right-click and choose Copy, and you could paste that data into Excel and go from there. But Access can do analysis too. For example, it can subtotal to determine the total that City Hall employees owe. Let's have a look at how to do that. Begin by clicking the Query Design button and putting the deadbeats table up there so we can work on it. Click Close. And then down for the fields down here we're going to work with, let's select the amount owed, the City Hall employees, and then the amount owed. And then up here on the upper row, look for the big summation sign, the big E. That's the totals button. Click that. And then down here under the amount owed column, change the default grouped by to, let's see, sum. There it is. And leave group by under City Hall employee question mark. That'll be just fine. So let's run this query and see what we get. And there we go. So now we know the total amount owed both by those who are not and those who are City Hall employees. Pretty slick. That's exactly what we were looking for. Let's see what else we might be able to do. If I come back to the Query tab, right-click and choose Design View, I can add a few more things. Let's see. Let's put the amount owed field in there a couple of more times. Just click on it a few times. There we go. All right. And under the second of the amount owed columns, let's change group by to count. That'll give us the count of how many there are. Let's change the next one to let's do the average here. And what else? How about the minimum, the smallest amount owed? That would be MIN, the min. And I need one more. Let's click an amount owed one more time. And this time let's get the max. That would be the biggest amount. Okay, so we've put a lot more information in the query. Let's run it and see what happens. Again, click Run. And wow, look at that. We've got a lot of information now about both the deadbeats who are not and are employed by the City Hall. We know that among those who are not employed by City Hall, they owe a total of $824,134. There are 552 of them. The average amount owed is about $1,500. The smallest is $50, and the largest is about $3,000. And we have the same information for deadbeats who are employed by City Hall. Okay, that's pretty good. That's what we're looking for. Let's right-click on the Query tab and choose Save and give it a name. Let's see. How about Deadbeat Summary? And click OK. All right. And so now we have pretty much all the information we need to answer the questions we're after. Specifically, we know now that these City Hall deadbeats owe collectively about $49,991. That on average they owe $1,190.26. And with all the information we have so far, we could write a lead something like this. Nearly a fifth of City Hall's employees owe the city somewhere between $58 and $2,900 in unpaid fees, fines, or taxes, an analysis of city records shows.